Here's my 7 expert tips to help you win at FPL this season. Hello and welcome to this FPL strategy video with me, Holly Shand. As the game gets more popular, it's really difficult to get that coveted top 10k finish. So in this video, I've got 7 expert tips to help you get there. It's taken me a long time to put this strategy video together, so if you enjoy it, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel. Let's aim for 300 likes on this one. Let's get into it. Tip number 1 then is to optimise the premium players. Now this is made easier this season because we've only got 4 premium players to pick from. De Bruyne, Haaland, Kane and Salah. Now we tend to see that most seasons having 2 to 3 premiums is the sweet spot, and last season most managers went with 2. Those that went with 3 with Haaland, Kane and Salah had a really strong start. This season a lot of managers are already shaping up to go with 1 premium. It may be an advantage to go with the 2 premium setup by adding Kane or Salah alongside Haaland, but I think the utility of the mid-price midfielders really means that for the first time ever in FPL, 1 premium is viable. And the Fantasy Football Hub AI best optimal team for game week 1 also goes with that 1 premium setup backing Haaland from the off. Tip number 2 is to make a captaincy matrix, at least for the first 6 game weeks of the season. Captaincy is such a huge element of the game in FPL, and being able to be prepared with maybe 2 or 3 really good options to split between each week can really help. Now, this point is really linked to point number 1 as well, because again, for the first time ever, we can kind of look at Haaland as being a permanent captain pick. So if you make a captain matrix and you look through the game weeks and you think, I'm going to captain Haaland if he's fit for all of the first 6 game weeks, then that may help you to decide that you do only need 1 premium. Now, I have looked into the AI predicted points over on Fantasy Football Hub for this as well. Link in the description if you want to have a look at that. And they predict Haaland to be the highest scoring player in all of the first 6 game weeks, including in that tricky game week 2 fixture against Newcastle at home. He's on 8 predicted points for that one. Salah at home to Bournemouth is only on 7.4 predicted points. So that's really important to bear in mind. And, you know, even if the worst happened and Haaland found himself injured and out for a period of games, it's an easy switch to get Kane into your team to provide a really good captain option over those opening weeks of the season. So with that in mind, looking at point number 1 and 2 together, maybe the 1 premium setup is the way to go this season. Now, point number 3 is to avoid early transfers. Now, I'm a huge advocate of making transfers as close to the deadline as possible. Now, we have to bear in mind the first 4 game weeks of this season, we do see a Friday night deadline. So I'd make a note of that in your diaries for now. But that also means that there's going to be less opportunity for price changes throughout the week anyway, which means that you're at less of a disadvantage of biding your time with those transfers. Now, it's good to bank transfer where possible because that gives you greater flexibility, because if you've got 2 free transfers, you can make 1 transfer, 2 transfers or even 3 transfers for a -4 and really shake up your squad if you need to. We also need to think though that sometimes it is required to make a transfer early in the game week, especially if you've got the exact funds to do so. We see the transfer market with price rises and price falls most volatile at the start of the season. So if there's a move that you're going to be priced out of, then absolutely do that as soon as possible. We saw a really good case of this in game week 2 last season, where Haaland and Kane started the season at the same price, but on the Sunday evening after Haaland had scored a brace against West Ham in game week 1, Haaland went up, Kane went down, and a lot of managers were priced out of that straight swap. Tip number 4 is to pick a winning formation. Now, traditionally in FPL, we've seen 3-4-3 be the go-to formation, but in recent seasons, 3-5-2 has been a lot more prevalent. Going with the attacking formations is the way to play the game because it's more exciting backing attackers over defenders, and goals and assists are the things that really give us the bread and butter of the game in terms of points. This season, with the amount of mid-price midfielders we've got, leaning towards that 3-5-2 formation does look optimal at the time of recording. And if we have a look at the Fantasy Football Hub AI best optimal team for game week 1, again, it's that 3-5-2 formation really coming to the fore. So try and go with that at the start of the season if you can. Tip number 5 is to have a good first substitute. Naturally, when we're drafting our teams for game week 1, we want to get as much funds into the starting 11 as possible. And the bench then ends up with a 4 million goalkeeper and defender and a 4.5 million midfielder and forward. But I think it's really important to have a good first substitute at the very least. Now, it's going to be challenging with this season in particular because the cheapest players in each price point really don't look that great for each position. Now, there are a few that I've picked out. Areola, 4 million at West Ham, could be a starter in the goalkeeper spot. He's challenging Fabianski for the number 1 shirt at West Ham right now. So that's something to look out for during pre-season. We look at the 4 million defenders. There may be some starters in there, but I think if you want a really good first sub, spending 4.5 million and going for someone like Pinnock at Brentford, who's in a team that have kept a good number of clean sheets, good opening fixtures, could be the way to go, because I think if you don't invest in that first substitute, then you're going to end up with a paper-thin bench, which will soon find you out. Now, when you look at the predicted points on Fantasy Football Hub, the midfielders and forwards set to be priced at 4.5 million, 5 million, and sometimes at 5.5 million as well, have very little prospects, which is going to make it more challenging. If you're looking at a different formation to a 3-5-2 and you want a good first substitute as a midfielder, you kind of need to go up to about 5.5 million at the moment with Dwight McNeil, and it's even worse in the forward spots. You're kind of having to look up to 6 million to Visser at Brentford. So it's not viable, really, this season. As things stand, some options may emerge in pre-season, but it doesn't feel viable to have a 4.5 million midfielder or forward as a good first substitute. That 4.5 million bracket in the defender slot is the one that we really need to look at. Unfortunately, there's a few problems with the 4 million defenders. Now, this is linked to tip number 6, which is to avoid new and promoted players in your game week 1 side. Now, this has been amplified now by the fact that we've got news of a game week 2 blank for Luton and Burnley. Luton's stadium upgrades are not going to be ready, so their game week 2 game has been postponed. Now, that's where we were seeing all the early value in our drafts, with Amari Bell at Luton and Jordan Bayer at Burnley being the 4.0 million defenders of choice. But I think we have to avoid them now as our good first substitute, given the blank in game week 2. And if you look at the fixture ticker, none of the promoted teams feature very highly. Obviously, Sheffield United coming out a bit better on the ticker than those two that blank, but again, I think I would avoid. And the same goes for players that are new to the Premier League. In terms of who's getting backed at the moment, I would be a bit wary about starting the season with. Nkunku at Chelsea is one of the top selected forwards at the moment, but we know in FPL there's so many players that join the Premier League that flop. We do see some that really do succeed. I think back in recent seasons, Haaland, of course, Bruno Fernandes, Mo Salah. But then you have a look at other players that we've seen arrive in the Premier League that have been big bandwagons in FPL. Darwin Núñez last season, a huge flop. Sancho, lots of hype around his transfer to Manchester United. He still hasn't really delivered in FPL. Timo Werner was on over 50% ownership 3 seasons ago. He flopped as well. Nkunku could easily be on that list. Now, a tough fixture in week 1. I'd give him a couple of weeks. Obviously, if he delivers in the first 2, then absolutely bring him on board. But he's a player that we kind of want to see some kind of promise from before really investing in our FPL squads. The final tip from me is to balance form and fixtures. These 2 metrics are really important for me in terms of making transfers. And I always feel like form should win out over fixtures. So when it comes down to those 50-50 decisions, I do look at form first. Now, form is very difficult to measure right at the start of the season. Obviously, we've got the fixture ticker, but we can look at the form of the final 10 game weeks of last season. If we look at goal involvement using the OptaStats tool on Fantasy Football Hub, Mo Salah, 13 goal involvements at the end of last season, topped that list. We also saw familiar names like Trent, Haaland and Mbomo really come to the fore in those last few game weeks. And then if we look at expected FPL points over that same period. Bruno Fernandes is in the mix as well, another player high on my agenda for game week 1. Now, I am going to be writing weekly articles for members over on Fantasy Football Hub each week throughout the season, looking at the form and fixtures and trying to blend those together to help us to find the top targets. But a player on top of their form can be absolutely fixture proof. If you want to delve further into the data on any of the points I made in this video, do check out memberships on Fantasy Football Hub. There's 50% off right now with that offer of win your mini league or your money back. Everything that they're putting together is to help you to succeed in FPL this season. So with those tools and my tips, hopefully you can go for that top 10k finish. As I said at the top, it's taken me a long time to put this together, so hit the like button. Let's try and get this to 300 likes. Subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed it. I'll be back very soon with another video. Thank you for watching.